the coldest, most desolate place on Earth. A land where even time seems frozen. Antarctica. A place untouched by history, sealed beneath miles of ancient ice. But not everything buried there is dead. Not everything forgotten has been lost. For beneath the endless white, something waits. Something older than mankind. Something that should have remained hidden forever. Tonight, we follow the story of those who found it, and the horrors they brought back to the surface. This is not a tale of discovery. It is a warning. The year was 2025. A joint expedition of 12 scientists and engineers touched down on the endless frozen continent. Their destination, Outpost Epsilon, a newly established research camp located nearly 300 kilometers inland from McMurdo Station. Officially, their mission was climate research, drilling deep cores of ancient ice to study the Earth's past atmosphere. At least, that's what the funding reports claimed. Unofficially, they were there because of something stranger. Weeks earlier, satellites operated by NASA and the European Space Agency had picked up unusual seismic signatures beneath the East Antarctic ice sheet. Not earthquakes, not volcanic tremors. These were rhythmic pulses, repeating with mathematical precision. The anomaly had no natural explanation. And so, a hand-picked team was dispatched. The moment the transport plane touched down on the white desert, the scientists understood what they had signed up for. Antarctica is not just cold, it is merciless. Winds screamed across an endless horizon. The temperature plunged below -40 degrees Celsius. Even their breath froze into ice the second it left their mouths. The camp itself was nothing more than a cluster of insulated modules, generators constantly rumbling to keep the cold from swallowing them alive. Inside, morale was tense but hopeful. They had food, power, communications. They were ready. Dr. Catherine Hawley, a geologist with 20 years of polar experience, led the mission. Calm, methodical, but secretly drawn to the thrill of chasing the unknown. For 2 nights, things went smoothly. Equipment checks, core drilling practice, data collection. But on the 3rd night, the anomaly made itself known. At 2:17 m, the station's seismographs recorded a tremor, not a quake, not ice movement. The signal came in short bursts, thump, thump, thump. Like a slow, distant heartbeat buried miles beneath the ice. At first, they dismissed it as machine error. But the pulses repeated. And this time, they didn't just register on the screens. Several team members lying awake in their bunks swore they felt it. Not through the floor. Not through the walls. Inside their own chests. A vibration in perfect sync with their heartbeat. By morning, Dr. Hawley made a decision. They would investigate the anomaly directly. The drills were set up by the end of the week. A long mechanical arm bored into the ancient ice, chewing through layers that hadn't seen sunlight in millions of years. At 800 meters, the core samples were already unusual, streaked with minerals that didn't belong, flecked with strange organic traces. But at 1,200 meters, the drill struck something. Hollow. The sound was unmistakable, the bit clanging against empty space where solid ice should have been. A cavern. For the first time in history, Antarctica had whispered its secret. And as the team stared into the abyss they had just opened, they didn't yet realize they hadn't just uncovered the past. They had awakened it. The discovery of the hollow chamber at 1,200 meters changed everything. Dr. Hawley immediately called for a halt in drilling. The borehole cameras were lowered, designed to capture the interior of subglacial lakes. At first, the feed showed only walls of blue ice, streaked with glittering fractures. But then, Blackness. A vast open void. The depth was extraordinary. Antarctica was known to conceal hidden lakes beneath its ice, like Lake Vostok, but this chamber was different. Its edges were too smooth, too symmetrical, as though carved by design rather than by nature. The team gathered in the communications room, their faces glowing pale in the light of the monitors. "Could be geothermal," muttered Dr. Amir Voss, the expedition's hydrologist. "Melted from below. Perfectly possible." "Perfectly?" one of the engineers scoffed. "You've seen the scans. Those walls look engineered." The argument went nowhere. What mattered now was access. And so, they began the excavation. Using heated drill heads, they expanded the borehole wide enough to lower instruments. Then eventually, a narrow human descent line. It took 4 days. 4 days of sleepless nights, filled with the same rhythmic tremors shaking the ground beneath their bunks, each pulse stronger than the last. By the 5th day, the chamber was accessible. The first to descend was Dr. Holly herself. Strapped into a harness, she lowered slowly down the shaft, her headlamp cutting a pale circle of light into the abyss. The others watched on the monitor as the camera on her chest streamed every moment. Ice walls, frozen mist. A sudden draft of air rising from below, impossibly warm for a chamber sealed away for millions of years. And then, the floor came into view, smooth, polished, nothing like the rough, jagged ice they expected. It looked like obsidian, glistening faintly under her lamp. Across the surface, lines ran in geometric patterns, deliberate, etched into the ground itself. The radio crackled. "Surface team, I'm standing on, I don't know what this is. These are markings, structures. This chamber wasn't formed naturally." Her words sent silence through the control room. One by one, more team members descended. What they saw defied explanation. Pillars of ice that had been hollowed and reshaped into archways. Walls scarred with grooves that looked almost like writing. None of it human, none of it recent. In the far corner of the chamber lay a mound. At first, they thought it was just ice, sculpted into an odd shape. But as their lights passed over it, the surface gleamed. Like bone, a rib cage, massive, fossilized. Dr. Voss whispered what everyone else refused to say out loud. "This isn't a cavern. It's a tomb." And as if to answer him, the tremors returned. Louder than before. Not from the walls, not from beneath the floor. From inside the mound itself. The chamber beneath the ice was unlike anything the team had ever seen. By now, the entire expedition had descended in shifts, mapping the interior with scanners and drones. Every scan told the same story. This was no natural cavern. Its symmetry was too precise, its arches too deliberate. Someone or something had shaped it. The so-called ribcage lay at the chamber's center. Nearly 20 meters long, half buried in the ice, its bones twisted and fused in ways no known creature could explain. Pale ridges protruded from its surface, as if part skeletal, part crystalline. The scientists gathered around, their headlamps dancing across the fossilized remains. "Could be a prehistoric whale," one muttered, his voice shaking more from nerves than conviction. "In the middle of Antarctica?" Another snapped. "That's not a whale. Look at the structure. It's not even vertebrate." Dr. Holly knelt close, her gloved hand brushing the surface. The bone was warm. Not ice cold, not fossilized stone. Warm, as though something deep within still generated heat. She pulled her hand back immediately. Her face betrayed nothing, but inside her mind was racing. The chamber walls held more secrets. Strange grooves lined the ice, curling into spirals and sharp angles that looked less like erosion and more like symbols. Patterns repeated, identical and deliberate, as if etched by intelligent design. Dr. Amir Vos took endless photographs, his breath fogging in the stale air. "These aren't markings," he whispered. "This is language." Days passed in fevered study. The surface team worked in silence, tension growing thicker with each discovery. Sleep was fleeting. The pulses came every night now, deep, resonant thuds that rattled their instruments and echoed inside their skulls. Some of the crew began to unravel. One of the engineers, Marco, claimed he heard whispers echoing through the cavern when no one else was around. Another swore he saw shadows moving along the chamber walls, even when no one carried a lamp. On the seventh night, one of the drones malfunctioned mid-flight and crashed near the ribcage. The crew rushed to retrieve it, fearing damage to their only mapping equipment. But when they pulled the drone free, they saw the ground beneath it had shifted. The mound was no longer still. The ribcage rose and fell, faintly, as though the thing beneath the ice was breathing. Panic broke out. Arguments erupted over abandoning the mission. Some insisted it was a natural geothermal phenomena, heat pockets shifting the ice. Others knew better. Dr. Hiley tried to keep order, but deep down she felt it too. The chamber wasn't just a tomb. It was a prison. And something inside was waking up. By the time the second week passed, Outpost Epsilon was unraveling. The tremors had grown violent. Not constant quakes, but surges rhythmic, like something testing the walls of its cage. Instruments flickered with static each time the pulses rolled through the ice, as if even the electronics recoiled. Then came the storm. Antarctic blizzards are merciless, but this one felt unnatural. Wind screamed across the plateau with such fury that the outpost shook on its supports. For 3 days, whiteout conditions kept them trapped underground, huddled inside the chamber, cut off from the surface world. It was during this storm that the mound began to split. At first, it was a hairline crack across the ribcage. But by the second night, the fissure stretched wide enough for steam to rise, curling in thick, sulfurous plumes. The air grew heavy, metallic, stinging their lungs. The radio crackled with half-words, garbled messages from McMurdo Station, before dissolving into static. The outside world was gone. On the third night, the fissure widened. The sound was unbearable, like glass fracturing under immense pressure. The chamber walls groaned, shards of ice falling from the ceiling. And then they heard it. A sound that froze every heart in the cavern. Not the pulses, not the tremors. A voice. Low, guttural, echoing through the stone. Not in English. Not in any human tongue. But every person who heard it felt the same meaning worm its way into their minds. A summons. A command. Come closer. The crew recoiled in terror. Dr. Holly screamed at them to stay back, but one man didn't listen. Marco, the engineer who'd spoken of whispers before. His eyes glazed, his body trembling. He walked toward the mound as if sleepwalking. They shouted. They pulled at him, but Marco didn't stop. He placed his hand on the ribcage, and the chamber answered. The fissure erupted. Ice exploded outward in a hail of shards. The mound shifted, rising, cracking, spilling black water across the chamber floor. For one breathless moment, everyone stared in horror as a shape began to emerge. Not fossil, not bone, flesh. Slick, pale, glistening flesh, thawing where ice should have preserved death. Veins glowed faintly beneath translucent skin, pulsing with the same rhythm that had haunted them for weeks. Markle screamed as his hand fused to the surface, his body convulsing. The others rushed forward, but stopped short as the light in his eyes went out. He went still, standing upright, frozen, his hand still embedded in the thing's body. And then, his mouth opened. Words spilled out. Not his words, not his voice. A deep, resonant chant in that same alien language, echoing louder than human lungs could produce. The chamber trembled. The rib cage split fully apart, revealing a vast cavity within. And from the darkness, something moved. Something older than mankind, something that should never have been disturbed. The crew fled, scrambling for the shaft, but the voice followed them, not in the air, not in the walls, but inside their minds. You have woken me. And the storm above howled even louder, as if the continent itself had been waiting for this moment. Panic tore through Outpost Epsilon. The surviving crew scrambled back into the living quarters above the chamber, sealing the hatch with steel locks. But locks meant nothing against what they had unleashed. Markle's body was still down there, fused into the ribcage, chanting words no human throat should ever form. His voice carried through the vents, vibrating inside the metal walls of the outpost. Even when they covered their ears, the sound found its way in, echoing inside their skulls. Sleep became impossible. Some swore they saw Markle's face in their dreams, whispering to them. Others claimed the ice outside the windows was shifting, pressing closer with every hour, as if the whole continent were crawling toward the station. Arguments erupted. Dr. Amir Voss insisted they had to continue studying, to record everything. We've discovered the greatest biological anomaly in history, he said, his voice shaking. If we destroy it, we lose everything. But the engineers, exhausted and terrified, wanted to leave immediately. We'll freeze before the next supply drop, one shouted. We have to call McMurdo, get a rescue team now. The radios answered with nothing but static. On the second night, the generator failed. The lights flickered and died, plunging the station into darkness. The only glow came from the cavern below, a sickly pale light, throbbing in rhythm with the pulses. It was then they realized the truth. The thing wasn't just waking, it was feeding. Every hour, the warmth in the station dropped further, as though heat itself was being drained into the chamber. Food spoiled faster. Water turned foul. Instruments corroded with frost even in heated rooms. Worse still was what it did to the people. One by one, the crew began to crack. A biologist named Serrano locked herself in her bunk, scratching spirals into the walls with her fingernails until they bled. Another, Jacobs, wandered outside into the storm without a coat, vanishing into the white void before anyone could stop him. Dr. Hawley tried to hold them together, but even she wasn't immune. At night, she heard her own name whispered from the darkness below. And sometimes when she closed her eyes, she saw shapes moving under her skin, veins shifting as though something were crawling inside her blood. Paranoia bloomed. They stopped trusting one another. Accusations of sabotage, of possession, of betrayal echoed through the darkened halls. Knives were kept close. Nobody slept near the others. By the end of the week, only 7 remained. 7 human beings clinging to sanity in a place where sanity had no meaning. And then came the sound that ended all doubt. Footsteps. Heavy, wet footsteps echoing up the shaft from the chamber. Slow, patient, coming closer. The locks on the hatch rattled. Someone or something was trying to open it. The hatch to the chamber rattled through the night. Every groan of metal sent the survivors deeper into panic. They barricaded the door with crates and tools, but all of them knew it wouldn't hold. Something vast, something relentless, was pushing against it. Then silence. Hours passed in stillness. No footsteps. No rattling. The only sound was the endless Antarctic wind outside. Dr. Holly ordered a watch. They took shifts by the hatch, weapons in hand, knives, axes, even sharpened pipes. Sleep came in snatches, broken by whispers that weren't whispers at all, but the echo of Markle's chant still bleeding through the walls. On the third day, the silence broke. A deafening crack thundered through the outpost. The ground shuddered, splitting beneath their feet. The cavern below was expanding. Ice walls collapsed in on themselves, dragging parts of the station down. The hatch tore open. Something rose through the shaft, not a creature in any human sense, but a shifting mass of pale flesh and bone, pulsing veins glowing beneath its surface. Its form twisted endlessly, impossible to comprehend. Where eyes should have been, there were hollow pits. Where a mouth should have been, there was only a black void that exhaled air older than the world itself. It filled the corridor, scraping against the walls, its presence alone driving the survivors to their knees. Some screamed. Others simply froze, their minds fracturing at the sight. Dr. Holly did not scream. She had expected this. She had seen it in her dreams long before they ever drilled the ice. "Seal the station," she ordered, her voice hoarse. "Now, before it reaches the surface." The survivors stared at her in disbelief. Seal the station meant suicide. But there was no choice. Working with frantic speed, they rerouted the power grid, overloading the generators to trigger a meltdown. Alarms blared as systems overheated, sparks raining down in the frozen corridors. The creature advanced, tendrils of bone and sinew reaching out, dragging itself closer. One survivor was caught and pulled screaming into its mass, vanishing without a trace. Another tried to flee into the storm outside, only to be swallowed by the white void before he took 10 steps. Finally, only Dr. Holly and 2 others remained. She shoved them toward the emergency exit, the only passage leading to the snowcats outside. "You have to leave," she told them. "You have to make sure the world knows. This can't be buried again." "But what about you?" one of them cried. Her eyes were cold, resolved. Someone has to keep it here. She slammed the bulkhead shut before they could stop her. The last thing they saw was her silhouette vanishing into the steam-filled corridors, carrying the detonator. Minutes later, as they fled across the ice in the blizzard, the station behind them erupted. A thunderous explosion shattered the silence of Antarctica, flames licking the night sky before vanishing into a cloud of ash and snow. The ground quaked, then went still. The survivors collapsed in the snow, watching the horizon burn. For a brief moment, they believed it was over. But as the blizzard cleared, they saw it. Far in the distance, cracks spiderwebbed across the ice sheet, cracks stretching for miles, glowing faintly from below. The thing was not gone. It was never just in that chamber. That was only a fragment. And now it was awake. Antarctica is a land of silence, a place where time holds its breath and secrets lie frozen for eternity. But not all secrets are meant to be uncovered. Beneath the ice, older than mankind, something waits. Something that should never have been disturbed. Outpost Epsilon is gone, its crew forgotten. But the heartbeat beneath the continent still echoes, pulsing louder with every day. And soon, the ice will break. Remember this story. Because when it does, we won't be ready.